Ever wonder what it looks like when an entire country gets a full economic health checkup? Well, today, that's what we're digging into. The patient is Pakistan. The doctor is the International Monetary Fund. And the diagnosis? Let's just say it's pretty revealing. So let's get right into it. To really get a sense of the stakes here, we have to start with this number, $7 billion. That's the size of the IMF support program for Pakistan. And look, this isn't just some friendly loan. This is an economic lifeline, a full-on emergency intervention. When you see a number that big on the table, you know the underlying problems are really, really serious. So that leads us to the big question, right? It's one thing to throw cash at the symptoms, but that's just a Band-Aid. At Pakistan's own request, the IMF decided it was time to dig way deeper and find the root cause. So what is the underlying sickness that's been plaguing this economy for so long? First, let's just quickly cover how this whole thing got started. This wasn't some routine visit where the IMF just shows up. No, Pakistan's own government asked for this deep dive. They wanted to get to the bottom of these persistent, nagging issues that have been holding your economy back for years. The specific tool the IMF used for this is something called a Governance and Corruption Diagnostic, or a GCD. The easiest way to think about it is like a full-body MRI for a country's economy. It's this incredibly deep, systematic scan designed to find every single weakness and vulnerability that's causing trouble. So, with the examination officially underway, what were the first things the IMF started to notice? What were those obvious, visible symptoms, the clear signs that told them something was really wrong with the country's economic health? Well, the symptoms are pretty clear, and they're chronic. We're talking about these economic crises that just keep happening over and over again. A legal system where contracts are, frankly, hard to enforce. And as you can see, all of this leads to low investment, a real lack of public trust, and public services that just aren't working efficiently. I mean, any one of these is a big deal, but when you see them all together, that points to a much, much deeper problem. And here's the really crucial point the report makes. These symptoms aren't just random bits of bad luck. They are sprouting from a very specific environment, a heavily state-dominated economy. So when you have the government involved in almost everything, and you combine that with this tangled web of confusing, overlapping rules, well, you've basically created the perfect breeding ground for all the problems we just saw. All right, so now we're moving from the symptoms to the illness itself. After that comprehensive checkup, the IMF was ready to deliver its core diagnosis, the actual root cause of Pakistan's economic troubles. And here it is, right from the report itself. The diagnosis is persistent and widespread corruption risks. And you gotta pay attention to the wording here. It's not just saying there are a few bad apples. The report says these risks are embedded. They're woven into the very fabric of the economy. This slide really connects the dots so well. Just look at that top line. A tax system that's confusing and not transparent, that doesn't just annoy people. It creates a high risk for corruption and means the government isn't collecting the money it needs. Or think about a weak legal system. If a business can't trust that its contracts are going to be honored, why would they ever invest? It's a clear chain reaction where these specific weaknesses lead to really predictable, damaging problems. And this chart shows us exactly where that sickness is most concentrated. The biggest chunk there, at 35%, is fiscal governance, which is basically a fancy way of saying how the government collects and spends its money. But you can also see huge issues in market regulation and the rule of law. It shows this isn't just one problem in one place, it's a systemic issue that's spread across the most important functions of the state. Okay, so we've got the diagnosis, but a good doctor doesn't just walk in and tell you you're sick and then leave. They give you a prescription. So let's shift gears and look at the IMF's recommended treatment plan for Pakistan's economic recovery. The prescription is a big one, and it has three main pillars. First, you have to fix the way money is managed. Second, you have to make sure the laws are fair and that they're actually enforced. And third, you need a complete overhaul of the country's whole approach to fighting corruption. This is a massive, comprehensive plan. So let's dive into that first part, economic governance. The goal here is a total transformation. It means moving from a complex, murky tax system to one that's simple and transparent for everyone. Shifting from weak government purchasing rules to strict ones that are actually enforceable, and finally reforming those inefficient state-owned companies with way better management and a whole lot more transparency. Next up, reinforcing the rule of law.
The prescription here is to modernize that overburdened court system to make it efficient. It means getting serious about going after financial crime and closing the legal loopholes that make it so hard to get stolen assets back. This is all about building a foundation of trust and predictability that an economy desperately needs to thrive.
And the final part of this treatment plan is a major strategic shift in how corruption is fought. Instead of just trying to punish people after something has already happened, the focus moves to prevention. That means picking leaders for key accountability jobs based on merit, not political connections. And a huge piece of this is transparency, like actually making the asset declarations of public officials available for everyone to see.
So, the diagnosis is clear and the prescription has been written. But what's the long-term prognosis? Let's talk about the road ahead and the very real challenges in actually curing the patient.
And here it is, maybe the most critical point of all. A plan is just a piece of paper. The actual recovery, the long-term cure, that depends entirely on a sustained commitment and having the political will to see these incredibly difficult reforms all the way through.
A full recovery is not going to happen in a vacuum. The report really hammers this home. It requires an all-hands-on-deck approach. Different parts of the government have to work together. The private sector needs to be involved. Civil society needs to be involved to provide oversight. But you see that last point on the list, sustained political will? That's the engine that has to drive everything else. And all of this leaves us with one final crucial question. The IMF has provided a detailed policy roadmap, a blueprint for recovery. But for a problem as deep-rooted as systemic corruption, are new rules and new laws really enough? Or does the cure ultimately require a much deeper shift in culture, in politics, and in society itself? That is the real challenge that lies ahead.